Okay, hi. Yeah, technical problems here. I'm doing thought I'd do a little video presentation just to explain a little bit more about the assessment and particularly what reflection is. So I've got a few of these. The first one is going to be kind of a cut down version of the thing that I talked about in the last lecture, for those that you were there, where what we did was to think about what reflection is all about, because I think that to a certain extent there's been a bit of a problem, and I think people have perfectly understandably got the impression that this assessment is basically just a bunch of hoops that we've got you to jump through. A bunch of hoops using Gibbs' reflective model, the situation, describe the feelings, do an analysis, action plan, all that kind of stuff. It is a set of hoops, but if I try and explain the rationale for the whole point of reflection first, then maybe it should see each of these steps, each of these little stages of the Gibbs model as being actually in some way sensible, rather than being just a bunch of rather random things and you're going, what should be in there, what should be in there? Well, it should become fairly clear what should be in there when I try to discuss the actual purpose of it, purpose of reflection. So the purpose of reflection is all about answering a single question, really. It's a rather long question, but it's basically, the question is, if I were to do this particular thing, something similar to this thing that I've just done, how would I do it next time? Okay, so how would I do it? That is the question that the whole point of reflection, that's what it's about. It's about trying to take from any experience, a particular experience such as the one that you did, getting together in groups, putting together a presentation, giving a presentation and so on, asking the question, how would I do it if I were to do it again? Now there might be different ways in which you might answer this question. You might answer this question, well, I'd do it exactly the same. That's pretty unlikely, okay, that you would do exactly the same. It's possible that you might have done it so perfectly, every bit was so seamlessly integrated, everything went so well, you would just do it exactly the same. More than likely you'd want to do it slightly differently. And the purpose of reflection is to actually sit down and consciously think about the whole process. Because I think one of the problems with life, and there's a kind of therapeutic angle, it's one of the problems with life, is that we tend to do. Right? We're in a situation and we tend to respond almost on a kind of automatic level. Well, it is an automatic level, almost on an autonomic level. Somebody says something to us, good morning, and you say good morning back. You're not necessarily thinking about that process, and that's good because it means that you can free up mental capacity to do other things. It means that you don't have to, ooh, good morning, ooh, they've asked me good morning, or somebody says, how do you feel? You usually say, oh, fine, thank you, how are you? Right? You don't usually start thinking, no. But that thinking about it is actually a very powerful process, because what it enables you to do is to kind of break free of the shackles of the kind of automated process. What's that line? Goes something like, the person who doesn't learn from history is condemned to repeat it. Well, this is what this reflective process is about. It's about sitting down, consciously thinking, well, how did I do? Could I have done things differently? How did I relate to people? How did they relate to me? And rather than just say, doing the usual thing that people do and go, nobody was listening to me, they're all a bunch of, or nobody was listening to me, that must mean I've got nothing interesting to say. Rather than doing that, try and think of alternatives. Maybe the way you said it wasn't a particular way. Maybe you didn't seem particularly confident. It's trying to think of all this. You're trying to get a 360-degree view of what you actually did, of what happened, of your feelings, of your thoughts, of behaviours, of things that people said to you, of things that you said to other people. You entertain everything, right? Now that is obviously a very long thing, and we've got 750 words for the first two sections, that's a maximum. So we're not going to put most of that in, but we need to think about it and think, well, okay, maybe was I a bit funny the way that I was presenting myself? Could I have been a bit more forceful? Maybe I should have been less forceful. And then thinking through that, thinking, well, is there any evidence for that? So it's a bit like the kind of CBT. Remember, cognitive behavioural therapy is all about trying to adopt a more scientific approach to your behaviour. So in the same way that when we have some kind of, anxiety disorder, we might think, everybody's looking at me. Rather than thinking that automatic thought, that negative automatic thought, right? CBT encourages us to maybe think of alternative ways of thinking about it, to become a kind of, if you like, more rational actor, somebody who's able to more rationally consider whether this is actually a reasonable thing. And within CBT, as you know, we often have evidence for and evidence against, and we try and evaluate whether this negative automatic thought is real, or is it something we should reconsider. Exactly the same thing with reflection, although we're doing it not what we can be doing it in the moment. Reflection can certainly happen in the moment, but most of the time, for the way that we're going to be doing this piece of assessment and the reflection in this assessment, it's not in the moment. It's very much retrospectively. Could I have done something different? And again, we're looking for evidence for and against. So it's that kind of consideration. So it's a process of trying to think about how you behaved, think about how people responded, think about what you thought, think about how you felt, and then ask the question, how would I do it next time? Yeah. And this isn't just useful for this assessment, this is also useful if you want to become a psychotherapist, because as psychotherapists we continually in situations where that didn't go well with that client, I don't think that client really trusts me, or I think I may have upset the client. And part of psychotherapist training is that they undergo supervision in which they will discuss these things with an experienced psychotherapist who's supervising the person, and they can again discuss these things. But it's also important in life. I mean, if you think about any aspect of your life, you know, going into a shop, having an argument with this boiler man that I keep referring to, in relationships, the question is, could I do something different? And we kind of know that in relationships we often get locked into patterns of behaviour. We get locked into arguments, we fall into different kind of roles, so we might adopt victim mode and we might see our partner or our friend as being a persecutor, or it might not be a personal relationship, it might be a work relationship in which we see our boss as a persecutor and us as the victim, and so on and so forth. And it's trying to break out of this endless automatic cycle of just doing and trying to think, well, let's try and think, how might I do this next time? So obviously some things you could do, you might say, I'll do it differently. And why would you do it differently? Because things were bad. You messed up. Right? You dribbled when you were doing a presentation, or you were overly aggressive in the way that you negotiated which topic you did with your colleagues, and so on and so forth. So things that you may personally have done bad. Now remember, this is all about you. Right? This is not a vent. This is not a rant. This is not you complaining that everybody was persecuting you. This is an attempt to look at you. It's about you, because you can't change anybody else. You can put yourself in a position where people may respond differently to you by changing the way that you communicate, rather than persecuting somebody saying, you always say that, or something like that, which is going to put them on the defensive. Think of a different way of saying it. Okay? Think of maybe saying something like, rather than saying, you always say that kind of thing, or you always say that, say, I sometimes feel that you are dominating the conversation a little bit too much. Something where you, again, expressing things differently may be that they're not able to respond in their automatic way, so they have to consider. So we're trying to get a communication here where reflection happens. But ultimately it's about you, because you can't change anybody else. You can certainly change your partners. You could say, I wouldn't ever go with these people again, but you're unlikely to meet these people again. Okay, so what does these people again mean? Okay, so it's quite tricky to say this, because this is about learning from the past, projecting it forward into the future. So it might be that we want to improve things that we did badly. How might you do that? This is part of the analysis section. What might we do here? Why did you behave in a particular way, and how might you fix it? It might be that you completely eradicate certain parts of the presentation. You say, well, that really didn't work. So rather than saying, let's improve it, say, we'll just drop it. But also, as well as focusing on the bad, I think it's really important to focus on the good. We've got this kind of idea that good, if we did something good, then that's great, we've done it well. Let's not bother. Let's go back to the bad, because that's the bit we didn't do very well. And I think sometimes as lecturers we can be quite bad at doing this. With feedback, we tend to focus on what you didn't do very well, and maybe say you did a few good things, but we focus mainly on improving the bad, do this differently next time, rather than improving the good. This was good, do it better, right? And I think there's a tendency, and I've got come up with this word in a lecture last week, beigification. Beigification. Beigification is the notion that what we're trying to do is to eliminate all the bad parts of our character, so that all the, we're kind of like, okay, if we sort all the bad bits out, then we're going to be a reasonable human being. But what about the good bits? What about saying we're very good at this, but actually maybe we could become even better at that? Right? So rather than beigification is basically making everything okay, making everything beige. You become just like a beige person. You do nothing badly, but you do nothing particularly well either, because you're not focusing on improving the good bits. So important to think, what went well, and could it have gone better, and how might it have gone better? And next time, how might I improve on that? And that's just as important as focusing on the bad things. I mean, you can ask a question: what would you rather watch? A film which had some fantastic parts to it, or some music which had some fantastic parts of it, but a few boring bits, right? So the kind of profile of the film was up and down in terms of really good bits here and less good bits down here. That's one film, or one piece of music. Another piece of music or film could be a film in which it was all okay, right? There was nothing terrible about the film, but there was nothing fantastic about the film either. And it's the same with music, could be the same. People might be the same. This person's good, they're competent, they're interesting, they're alright, but there's nothing which makes you go, wow. So focus on the good as well. So how would I do it again? So there's two bits of this, which is kind of backwards looking, and trying to say, well, what have I learned? I've learned that maybe I could be a little bit more, I could listen more. It's a classic one, I could listen more. Or maybe it's the opposite. It doesn't always have to be persecuting yourself. Maybe you could say, well, actually, maybe what I should do is to be a little bit more forceful. Maybe I'm the kind of person that takes too much of a back seat, and I've got a great contribution to make here. So why am I backwards and coming forwards? Why am I not giving everybody else the benefit of my experience, of my good ideas? Now, you can see quite quickly this could get into some kind of rampant narcissism and ego, some kind of egomaniacal ravings. But you've got to be balanced. It's trying to be balanced, trying to be fair, trying not to be too self-deprecating, trying not to blame yourself, but at the same time try not to blame everybody else. So we've learned certain things about ourselves. This is the reflective process. We learn what we might do better, what we might do differently. Okay? That's the learning, but the next bit, that's basically the analysis. The analysis is this. And you will only have a very small amount in there. There may be 1 million things, or 20 things, or 5 things, or whatever, that you want to talk about, but you've only got a certain amount of words. So pick on the things, pick the thing or things, and keep them smaller, remember? Do more with less. Pick the things that you think are the ones that the experiences that you feel you really learned, the most important learning experiences to you. Right? Don't try and please me. This is about you. Try and think about yourself and say, well, what is the important? What have I really learned from this? Keep those down to a small number. Don't provide a list of them. Explain them. Go through them. Or it could be one thing. Next step, once you've explained that, once you've analysed your contribution in all of the sections, the next step is to say, well, okay, so if this were to happen again, how would I do it? And that's the action plan. The action plan is to say, well, yeah, I've learned something from this. So if I'm in similar situations, how can I put that into a set of concrete steps in place so that when I am in a situation like this, when I've got to get together in a group, or I've got to do a presentation, or when I'm interacting with the boiler man, or when my child has a tantrum, which could be something you talk about in section 3, or when you have an argument with your partner, which could be something that you talk about in section 3. What might I do? Concrete, that's the action plan. So that's the kind of process. So think about it that way. What will I do again? What are the key points that I've learned? What are the things that struck me? Really think about it, because I think if you start to think about it, this becomes more, and actually quite a useful piece of assessment. Because it could be something that if you start to do this in life more, and some people do this more than others, this could improve the quality of your relationships and interactions with other people. This process, getting used to this process, it's very unlikely that most of you are going to get involved in psychotherapy ever again. This is the module you've done, you've got the qualification, maybe find it interesting, but you are maybe unlikely to practice as a therapist. But even if you haven't, this can improve small bits of your life. You know, your interactions with partners, friends, children, people in shops, people at work, because you're constantly learning. You're breaking down this automated process and trying to use that to point to the future. What we're trying to do here is just take the past and use the past to predict the future and help us do better then. So, so that's the basic process. Focus on the good bits as well as the bad bits. How could you be better? Be honest, be critical of yourself, but there's no need to beat yourself up. Try and be positive in a kind of, critical way. Okay, thank you.